feel we might have to get too long for me to feel what's that you said about it? The right time to discover everything that I can recognize. Before the thoughts break.
Enter the classroom of any teacher in America, and you will most likely see an educator instructing on new material, managing classroom behavior, facilitating discussion, tracking student academic growth, and of course, grading. While it seems obvious that grading occurs in our schools, we have not yet been able to figure out and agree upon what grading should exactly look like. Education scholars and researchers have contended for quite some time that traditional grading practices are controversial and may not, in fact, provide a good measure of student learning. The validity of grades that are assigned by teachers arbitrarily has been called into question time and time again. This presentation will discuss the ideology of grading, specifically focusing on the positives and negatives of the movement towards standard-based grading. And it goes without saying that grading takes place in classrooms across the country as a measure of student performance and overall academic achievement. A system of grading seems to be ingrained in the DNA of our society, with tests, grading, and ranking becoming ever more prevalent in an increasingly competitive job market. The primary function of all classroom projects and activities is to benefit students' education, and teachers' responsibility to grade exams and assignments are a major part of this learning process.
I find an easy way out. Collapse that attention at the side of your mouth, and it's a shame to keep on.
Grading has been traditionally used to determine whether or not students are promoted to the next grade and to sort, rank, and track students throughout the school year. But what if you have a student that, based on the traditional gradebook, received an A in a class, but really does not truly have mastery of both general and complex material that he or she has learned? Standards-based grading tries to resolve this issue. First of all, standards-based grading does not rely on ambiguous criteria and vague averages of point-based systems that convey confusing meaning, typically meaning that is inaccessible to students and their families. A percentage or point value does not always reflect true academic knowledge. Second, standards-based grading only focuses on mastery, a measure of academic achievement, and is not diluted by how well students behave, how often they attend class or do homework, whether or not they hand in extra credit, or how much effort they even put into their assignments. This, in effect, minimizes or even eliminates non-academic elements in reporting students' academic competency. A traditional grading system could use grading reports to reward or punish students unrelated to their achievement levels. However, a standards-based report card will include an overall grade and list mastery levels in different academic standards, often accompanied by accessible resources to students and families detailing the rubrics and metrics used to determine marks for mastery. The standard-based grading model stems from the idea that learning may take more than one attempt. Therefore, students have multiple opportunities to be evaluated for mastery. Furthermore, data collected on mastery levels for standards will guide teacher instruction because teachers can identify areas where individual students need reteaching or need more work towards proficiency. Another advantage of standards-based grading is greater consistency between teachers' grading and reporting practices. For example, a student may submit the same assignment to teacher A and teacher B, but it is very likely that ambiguous criteria of a traditional grading approach will leave room for teachers to be more strict or lenient. While in contrast, A standards-based approach will expect teachers to evaluate students based only on objectives. Lastly, using this approach means that differentiation can be implemented more successfully because high performers can demonstrate early mastery and move on to more challenging content, while struggling students can be retaught, retested, and accommodated to show mastery. Overall, the standards-based approach sets clear academic goals for students that can be easily determined for attainment, and then provides rich data to communicate to students and stakeholders progress and growth. Grading in this approach is more easily reproducible because instruction and content standards will be aligned, so teachers develop a logical sequence for developing knowledge.
Although there are considerable benefits to standards-based grading, there are also substantial drawbacks that should be considered. The first of these drawbacks is of implementation. Oftentimes, parents, teachers, and administrators are so bewildered by the change that the standards-based grading system gets discarded after only a few years. Another substantial challenge is the fact that with standards-based grading, the only measurement of assessment is whether or not a student has met an objective. Qualities such as organization, diligence, attendance, and punctuality, which are important, are effectively left out of the equation. Teachers of students with special needs face a daunting task when it comes to assigning grades for their students. The following example demonstrates the shortcomings of the system. In the article Grading and Reporting in a Standards-Based Environment, Implications for Students with Special Needs, Guskey and Jung use an 8th grade special needs student to illustrate the potential limitations of a standards-based grading system. This particular 8th grader has worked hard and has made a great deal of progress towards her IEP. However, despite the gains she has made, in a standards-based grading system, she would still receive a poor grade in the class for failure to master the objectives. Implementation clearly is key, and administrators and teachers need to have a complete understanding of the function of standards-based grading and how it can be used to further the success of all of their students.
The demands of No Child Left Behind legislation calls for rigor and grade deflation have led many urban and suburban school districts to implement standards-based report cards. Yet the implementation of these report cards often presents a challenge for educators, students, and guardians. When setting performance and content standards, educators should avoid relying too much on standards-dense curricula that often use language too complex for parents and students to understand. Administrators should keep standards between 4 and 6, quantities that are easy for the human mind to remember. The best reporting standards are accurate enough to communicate the knowledge, skills that students are expected to learn, but not incredibly detailed so that they lose their meaning and functionality when shared with parents and students. There are 3 types of learning goals that should be featured on standards-based report cards: learning goals, product goals, process goals, and progress goals. Product goals discuss what learners need to know and accomplish. Process goals explore learning activities and how students behave while learning. And progress goals gauge improvement, how much students have gained from class time.